The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now let's talk about your take on the documentation or lack thereof behind the occupant of the Oval Office, since yesterday was the second inauguration and the second swearing in of this president. Let's talk about the extent to which the documentation that you have seen is either incorrect, insubstantial, or clearly fraudulent.
Well, let me put it this way. Joe McInerney and I, who's one of the other co-founders of Stand Up America, we were very taken back by the release from the White House of the copy of the birth certificate for Barack Obama. And we had a number of our analysts look at it, and immediately within 24 hours we knew that it was a forgery. But yet nobody else took up the banner other than a few other columnists and some websites. Nobody in Congress would do it. But I can recall at 17 years old, when I went into West Point, the first thing I had to do, even getting cleared, was a background check before we could even be accepted into West Point. And then to get a confidential clearance our first year. And then, of course, once we left West Point, then we had to get further clearances. In my case, when I went to Europe with the 82nd, I was an intelligence officer, so I had to get another background check before I got a secret clearance. And then it evolved into a nuclear position I had. That was the old Davy Crockett, which was a ground-launched small nuclear weapon. And for that, I had to get a top secret clearance as well as what they call a prefix 5 clearance. So to get where I got, I had to have a lot of clearance and continued background checks. And of course, we know that Obama and his supporters have spent millions of dollars covering up or concealing all his background information, especially at the colleges, the use of duplicate or several Social Security numbers. And so the question remains today, is this gentleman that's in the White House properly cleared and vetted president? We know even at the state level, Terry, a lot of the states don't vet these people that run for office, whether they're legal or illegal. And so our system, to me, is completely broken down and validating the leaders that we put not only in the executive branch and the appointments therein, but also some of the congressional members and even into the court system. So we're not getting the best and brightest to lead our country, and we can see the state of affairs that we're in now. That's very true. But I think this particular group in the White House now is probably the most corrupt, deceiving organization I've ever seen, and it's permeated all through the State Department, even into the Defense Department. And we can see it all the way from Benghazi all the way up through what we see going on in Algeria and even Syria today. The American people are not being told the truth of what's really going on. And, of course, having just returned from the Syrian border twice in the last 6 months, I can tell you we have no respect, no credibility overseas. And it seems to be reduced globally each and every day by the lack of action and lack of leadership of the people in Washington, D.C.
I find it amazingly ironic that if you look at the 23 executive orders that the president signed to quote-unquote deal with gun violence, if the president of the United States wanted to buy a firearm, I don't think he could pass the background check because he has multiple social security numbers, doesn't have a good birth certificate, and doesn't seem to have a stable, I mean, you know, there are a number of things that would be red flags or should be red flags at BATF against someone getting a weapon. I don't think he can pass the background check that he set up for himself.
Well, I don't think so either. But again, back to the vetting system for these political people is not what it is like in the military. It's almost today we could have someone in this country run for office, they could win, and in fact, no vetting back to track their background. And, you know, it brings into mind the Manchurian candidate, how easy that individual would be to integrate into our government at any level. We know, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood is already infiltrated into agencies in Washington, D.C. And even under Bush, we had the Muslim outreach program where we put 2 Muslims in the Defense Department, very questionable, and fired Steve Coughlin, who was a major at the time, because he said we're being infiltrated by his radical Islamist group. So we've been completely infiltrated across the board, Terry, and to the point where we have weakened our government so much. It's going to take a tremendous turnaround to get this country back on track again because of all the damage that's been done.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.